I want to touch on the idea that veganism is a threat to certain cultures. Primarily, today, this debate rages around specific cultures such as the Inuit, the Aborigines, Samis, and Mongolians that still make use of animals in much the same way that they have for hundreds of thousands of years. And there's still plenty of other tribal people out there that I can name, but that would take all day. This point, due to socioeconomic reasons, is quite valid, and both sides of the debate realize this. However, it's important to keep in mind that veganism, referring to the political unit and not necessarily the ethical philosophy, has very little concern with this type of lifestyle. I'll touch on this a bit later for logical and ethical purposes, but for now, let's keep in mind the fact that what nearly all vegans are primarily concerned with is the first world factory farming, which also includes the massive industrialized fishing operations. The link between tribal hunting's cultural significance and modern factory farming methods is almost non-existent. Tribal hunters actually kill their prey with primitive weapons that take many years to tactically wield. They stalk their prey with little more than their own sense of direction, their own 2 feet, and handmade transportation devices such as boats, sleds, sleighs. They learn about their prey, which almost always brings about a great deal of respect for the prey. It's very hard to hunt something down with primitive weapons and at the same time not build some sort of respect for the animal. This respect for the animal places an ethical dilemma for true tribal hunters when they have interactions with the animals. And the difficulty of this type of hunting gives the animals a more realistic chance to defend themselves. The odds aren't stacked against the animals so heavily. Even modern day slaughterhouse workers, the people that do nearly all of our killing of animals, know very little about the individual animals they kill. Slaughterhouses simply did not have the time, the money, or the ethical obligation to give their workers the time to get to know much of anything about the animals prior to their slaughter. The lines need to keep moving in order to ensure efficiency. Who has time to respect animals as individuals when the system they are being put through does not deal with them as individuals? A single pig to a pig farmer, or a slaughterhouse, is of very little financial consequence to them. So where is the incentive to bring about this tribal bond of respect for the individual animal? Likewise, the consumer of a factory farmed animal very rarely even sees the animal they eat until after it's dead, processed, packaged, and stored neatly on a refrigerated shelf. As consumers of factory farmed animals, we do not share in the typical rights of eating the flesh of animals. We consumers have forsaken the tribal mentality of reflecting on the dead animal's life as we use it to nourish our bodies, minds, present, and future. Also, let's not forget the many other tribal traditions that we Westerners / first worlders have such little respect for that we do not even attempt to learn them, resurrect them, or even preserve them. When was the last time you saw a Westerner trying to preserve the nakedness of their prehistoric ancestors with their own wardrobe choices? When was the last time you saw a Westerner trying to adopt a lifestyle free of the alphabet? When was the last time you saw a Westerner trying to embrace the idea of living outside every day? When was the last time you saw a Westerner giving up on the idea of all types of jobs and solely just living off the land? I'm not even talking farming. You see, as Westerners, we have a wide variety of choices that we can make due to the achievements and hardships of past beings on this planet. Yes, even animals also help to build our present-day comforts. And when given that choice, we overwhelmingly choose to disown tribal practices of all sorts. However, the only time you will hear modern-day humans almost unanimously clamor to preserve their tribal culture is when they want to kill and eat an animal. So why is that? Why is it that very few Westerners want to talk or want to walk around naked in the forest with their family members? hunting with primitive bows and arrows, gathering food with homemade baskets, but still clinging to eating meat? Well, it seems fairly obvious. Most tribal practices have a direct and immediate cost to the human making the decision. Walking around naked is great, but you're not well protected from other creatures, humans, or nature. Houses are burdensome, and no one likes paying for them, but at the same time, they provide us with a place to store our goods and provide a safe haven for friends and family. And going without a house puts us in immediate danger. Tribal hunting is probably a fulfilling activity to humans, but at the same time, it is an extremely inefficient means of survival. Gathering food is another great activity to tie us to the past, but at the same time, it is also extremely inefficient and requires a great deal of knowledge and practice. Meanwhile, just simply eating meat has very few immediate negative consequences for a modern factory farm consuming human. Let's face it, the one bearing the vast majority of the negatives in that scenario is the animal, not the human, which is really the crux of the issue. The positives for the human in that scenario are immense and immediate, while the negatives are pushed almost entirely onto the unwilling and completely helpless participant, the animal. This is a selfish choice that is lazily dressed up with culture in order to fool ourselves into thinking that we are preserving the ways of our ancestors. If you want to keep your ancestors' tribal cultures alive, then do it. Don't just swipe a credit card at Wendy's and pretend that you're honoring the ways of your ancestors. Now let's return to the actual surviving tribal peoples of today. As a vegan, I personally have very little issue with tribal hunting. However, if one of these tribes has the economic ability to live a vegan lifestyle, I would hope they would voluntarily. At no point can veganism be forced onto anyone. You can no more force veganism onto someone than you can force someone to be a true follower of Christ. Not only would it be a terrible strategy, but it would go against the very core principles of veganism, which is to respect the natural rights of others. You can't do that if you're forcing beliefs onto people. I do not say this because I wish to rob natives of their culture. Cultures are not to be defined by any one cultural practice. To presume that a culture lives or dies solely upon the eradication of one practice is to say that everything else the culture practices has nearly no value at all. This seems like more of a slap in the face to natives than anything I've ever heard a vegan say about tribal hunting. As of now, most tribes kill because they have to, not solely because they want to. So please, if you're a Westerner and you want to justify killing animals for food, you're going to need more than just using tribal peoples as a pawn. No one ever tapped into their spirit animal by eating a McRib.